From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan this week was received well in Taipei, but created concern inside the Biden administration and consternation in Beijing. What did the speaker accomplish, and what comes next as China conducts military exercises around the island after her visit? Plus, the U.S. Senate votes 95-1 to admit Finland and Sweden into the NATO alliance. We'll tell you about the one and the one and what that vote means. So welcome. I'm Paul Gigot, the Wall Street Journal editorial page, here with my colleagues Joe Sternberg and Kim Strassel. Welcome to you both. Two big developments in foreign policy this week. Let's start with the speaker's trip, and let's listen to her talk while she was in Taipei about why she's there and China's objections.
That there are certain insecurities on the part of the president of China as to his own political situation, that he's rattling a saber. I don't know. But it doesn't really matter. What matters to us is that we salute the successes of Taiwan. We work together for the security of Taiwan. And we just take great lessons from the democracy in China.
It isn't clear precisely why the speaker needed to go at this time. Just the context chronologically here. It was leaked several weeks ago that the speaker intended to go. We don't know who leaked, but the speaker's office itself is usually very tight-lipped about these trips. And once that leaked, President Biden was asked about it, and he said publicly that the Pentagon was concerned about the visit and said this was the wrong time to go in the Pentagon's eyes. And of course, China started to raise all bloody heck in objections, claiming that this would be a serious setback for U.S. relations, promising serious consequences, including for some spokesmen, perhaps military consequences. And indeed, now in the wake of the trip, China is conducting its most significant military drills ever around the island, including essentially surrounding it with a variety of naval aircraft and firing ballistic missiles in the vicinity of the island, making other threats. Joe, what do you make of all of this and what the speaker accomplished, if anything?
Well, first off, I think that she accomplished something by going, despite all of the pressure she seems to have been under to not go in the period leading up to the trip. I mean, we should point out that she was in the neighborhood already. This was part of a broader tour that she was doing through parts of East Asia. And it also is not that unusual for relatively senior U.S. figures to visit Taiwan. I think, you've had various members of Congress go over the years, various lower level administration officials, although this is the first time the Speaker of the House had gone in 25 years, I think it is. So from that perspective, this actually should not have spiraled into the big event that it did. I mean, Beijing is never happy about these visits, but usually what you would expect is a bunch of fulminating statements out of, various Chinese officials and state media outlets for a period, and then things would reset. What went wrong in this instance was the Biden administration attempt basically to discourage her from going and to signal that the administration thought that this had been a bad idea. And importantly, that's why I think it's so important that she did go in the end, that she was signaling, whether this was the intent when this visit was first arranged, in the event, the signal ended up becoming the U.S. political class is not united behind a warier approach to China as represented by what the Biden administration seems to have been signaling here, and that there is, in fact, still a well of support within the Congress for Taiwan and its democracy.
Kim, the larger diplomatic context here goes back 50 years to 1972 and the Shanghai Communique between the U.S. and China back in the Nixon-Kissinger days. And ever since then, and it's been reinforced in communiques since, the U.S. has agreed that there is only one China, though it has allowed China and Taiwan to both claim to be the one China. But there's an ambiguity there about what the U.S. believes. At the same time, both U.S. and China agreed in the communique in Shanghai and since that any reunification of Taiwan with China would be peaceful. Now, that's what China and the U.S. refer to when they mean the status quo of U.S.-Chinese policy. And the debate is in many ways over who's trying to change that status quo. China accused the U.S. in the wake of Pelosi's visit of the U.S. of trying to change that status quo and to use trips like Pelosi's and other measures, other diplomatic efforts to try to essentially make Taiwan a separate country. Of course, Pelosi was at pains in her trip to say, no, there's no change in policy here. As you heard, she's supporting Taiwan. And let's listen to Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, talk about this.
There is a precedent for a speaker, we've talked about this in here, to travel to Taiwan, and so none of that changes. And so, there's no reason for Beijing to turn this visit, which is consistent with our policy, into some sort of crisis, or to use it as a pretext to increase aggressive military activity in or around the Taiwan Strait. But again, it doesn't change anything.
Kim, the U.S., of course, thinks China is attempting to change the status quo through its attempts and determination increasingly expressed to reunify Taiwan on a much faster timetable. And this week, U.S. administration official that I spoke with said Xi Jinping wants to do it on his watch. So that's the nub of this dispute. Kim.
Yeah, we call this policy strategic ambiguity. And as you note, it's been in place for about 50 years. And I don't think that there's any question that if anyone is rocking this boat, it is in fact China. China's the nation that's been increasingly more aggressive in the region under Xi Jinping. They have talked even about moving that timeline up as soon as 18 months in terms of some sort of forcible reunification or taking over of Taiwan. And that was exposed a little bit a couple of months ago. President Biden took his knocks for wandering into this and suggesting that we would have more commitment to Taiwan's defenses, and outright said that. He was hit for that, supposedly rocking the strategic ambiguity policy. But I think what it actually showed more is him acknowledging this situation, that China is the one that is no longer holding to its side of the bargain of sitting around and waiting for peaceful reunification. It's pushing that. And I think it requires us, maybe in the wake of Nancy Pelosi's trip, to rethink that policy of strategic ambiguity, or at least be prepared for China to no longer honor it explicitly, and to think hard about what we're going to do in terms of a more genuine defense of Taiwan and its independence, whether that's militarily, but also what we can be doing to also better integrate it into the global economy with trade deals, et cetera, because it remains too reliant on China as its largest trading partner at the moment.
Joe, you lived in Hong Kong for several years, as I did, and I think one of the ironies of this latest crisis is that the Chinese and Taiwan relations were actually getting much better. Expanded trade ties, very close cross-strait family ties, visiting, business investment, cross-strait investment. And the reason they have soured of late, one reason, is because China has begun to talk more aggressively about reunification on its timetable, but also the Hong Kong precedent. Remember, China promised Hong Kong one country, two systems, a high degree of autonomy in its treaty with Britain when Britain agreed to hand over Hong Kong. And the crackdown on Hong Kong with the squeeze on its freedoms, really extinguishing significant freedoms, putting in jail many people who have just demonstrated in the streets, threatening life sentences against many prominent Hong Kong dissenters who have fought for more self-government. That has had a distinct impression, made a distinct impression on Taiwan. And Taiwan, which is a democracy in and of itself, says, we don't want to be ruled like that. And that has caused a popular revolt against any kind of near-term reunification with the mainland.
Yeah, and I think it's impossible to overestimate the significance of that Hong Kong example. And also not just Hong Kong, but Xinjiang, the large region in the west of China, which for many years Beijing had treated largely as an autonomous region within China proper. So it was a different legal setup from Hong Kong, but still kind of this view that it was culturally distinct from the rest of China and therefore would be able to exercise a certain amount of local control. And that is gone now too under Xi Jinping and his crackdown on the Uyghurs in Western China. And, I think that the parallels for Taiwan in both of these cases are pretty clear, because I think that, certainly within Taiwan, you it always had a large portion of the population that was not supportive of the idea of outright independence. In fact, one of the two major parties there, the KMT, has always campaigned on the basis of closer political and economic ties with the mainland, trying to suppress any talk of formal independence. But I think that as Xi Jinping's crackdowns in Hong Kong and Xinjiang, and also his general tightening of political and economic control within China proper has proceeded apace, I think that it's becoming clear that he is not going to tolerate political alternatives to Communist Party rule in any territory that Beijing considers to be its own. And also that Communist Party rule, where it extends, is going to mean more and more authoritarian political and economic control. And I think it's the combination of those two factors that really seems to be causing a lot of rethinking in Taiwan right now.